Tuesday, August 22nd, Charter Review Committee. Jim Levesque, Heather, Steve Archibald, and Michael Reyes will not be here. I can do minutes if you want, Mark, or would you be willing to do it? Or
I'll help you out, sure.
okay, it should be. Since we don't have a lot of people, it's going to be a shorter agenda. I was unable to get the minutes completed in time, so we'll have that for the next meeting. And for the next meeting, I will, based on what we talked about tonight and what we've talked about so far, although we haven't taken any votes, it's sort of been some of the consensus of what things we're going to be doing. I'll come up with a revised draft of the proposed charter, taking out a lot of the things that we said as in the public hearing were the clarifying things actually muddled things, so we're going to pull that back out, and we may add back things later. So we'll have a cleaner copy at the next meeting. So I gave 4 handouts, and I'll go with the one that says no person who's a write-in candidate first. So this was proposed last time, and this is a different wording. This wording came from Carl Luck, and I'll just read it. No person who is a write-in candidate for election to town office, if no candidate's name is printed on the ballot, therefore, shall be deemed to be elected unless they receive the number of votes at least equal to the number of signatures which would be required by law to place their name on the ballot at such election as a candidate as aforesaid. These are his recommendations of why he's recommending this. This only comes into play when there are no names on the ballot for the elected position. Our previous version we had basically said anybody, whether write-in or somebody on the ballot, had to get the minimum number. So this is different than that. So if there's a printed nominee, this process would not happen. The assumption is they got the minimum currently of 42 votes to get on the ballot one way or the other, or the caucus nominated. Does not affect the number of votes required of the printed nominee. Encourage residents to be interested in serving, need to either take out paper or run an open write-in campaign. If a write-in candidate cannot manage to receive the required number of votes, it's felt the better, more open process for the position to be filled by the appointment process until the next election. And that appointment process is the remaining members of that elected board and the Board of Selectmen meeting and joint meeting. So I'm putting that out there. We had voted previously not to do this. We're missing 4 people tonight. We're certainly not going to vote on it tonight, but I wanted to put it out there. We decided to bring some things back that we thought we should just revisit one more time, especially since we have 2 new members since last time. I know you just received this. We didn't send this out in advance, but do you have any immediate reactions?
Just for a point of clarification, on the appointment process. The appointment process would be that the person would be appointed by a joint vote?
A joint meeting of the remaining members of the board they were going for, or that was open, and the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, so basically if it's a 5-member board and the Board of Selectmen, then it would be 9 people voting.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So what would happen is that it would be considered a failure to elect, which is true of any position, that if nobody runs for it and nobody gets any write-in votes, that's considered a failure to elect, and that goes through the appointment process.
I can say that I voted against this when it first came up. Since then, I've had time to think about it. I thought about some of the comments that we got, and I'd be willing to reconsider.
I would be willing to reconsider.
Well, you wouldn't reconsider because you were...
Yeah, I was for it originally, but
Yeah.
I'd be willing to bring it before the group again.
Yeah.
The only thing is I don't like the wording of this particular. I think it needs a lot of work. In fact, for clarifying the first one, if it's a case where there's 3 candidates for 2 slots, if there's a printed name for one, I think there's some clarifying there. And I don't know if any it makes sense the way it's written. I know what the intent was, I don't like the way this is particularly.
So if you want to come up with some proposed language, this actually tracks, based on what Carl's email was, it tracks state law. So if we can turn it into English language, which is always good first, and then we can turn it over to town council and turn it into legalese. I think this went right to legalese. But that's important. You're right, because if it said, if no candidate's name is printed on the ballot, if there's 2 slots and 1 candidate is,
Exactly.
then it doesn't apply. So yeah, we have to, it would need to be. Okay. Nancy, any comments?
No, I have to look it over again.
Okay.
I think the other, and then the only other point of clarification that I would look for would be whether or not there's how often this comes up. And is it like once every 10 years?
No, it's actually more often than you realize. Sewer has had this situation 2 or 3 times. Park might be one. So it's ones that typically there's been a hard time getting volunteers to actually run. But we can get that. I know that it's gone on all the way back in the 80s. I remember that too. So, all right. So we'll put this on the agenda to be discussed. I will alert Carl to do it, to let him know that this is going to be back on the agenda. The next one was ranked choice voting. There's been a lot more information out recently. I'm not asking anyone for what I propose to do is to have somebody from the campaign to do this statewide to come and talk to us. This language came from town of Western Mass that adopted it. There were 2 towns that adopted it. The state of Maine has adopted it. It's a nonpartisan. Both Republicans and Democrats have raised interest in it. Certainly the congressional race right now with the 3 Republican candidates and the 8 or 9, I can't remember the number, the current on the Democratic side. When you have a candidate saying, I think I can get elected with 19% of the vote or 15% of the vote, it doesn't quite feel right. This would get to the point where you have to come up with at least 50% of the vote to do it. But those are some of the things that we would have somebody come in. So when we do go over the schedule, we'll just come back to that. I think it's a good opportunity just to look at it as well. The third paper was Mass General Laws 231A. So in the proposed charter, it talks about stating that the town manager is responsible to alert people who may be violating the terms of the charter or the town bylaws, because we don't actually have any one person who is designated to do that. We sometimes have to rely on citizens to do it, and other times it's not clear, especially like in the bylaws, there's some things the police enforce because it's clearly stated, fire chief, other things. And so one of the things that it does is that it provides that the town manager bring the attention to the person who's maybe violating it, and if the town manager is violating it, the board of selectmen have to bring it to the town manager's attention to do that. And so it currently refers to Chapter 231A, Chapter 231A of the general laws, and that basically says that what would happen is that if the people don't respond, you'd go to court and seek a declaratory judgment, basically saying that we agree that this person's not doing it. So that's to get more information on this. I think I want to get more. We've not specifically asked town council about this section within the bylaw, whether it's written properly or not. So that's background information. You don't need to do anything.
And what was the genesis behind this?
So right now, there's no one in charge of enforcing the charter, or at least raising the issue that there's a charter issue, or town bylaws.
So does 7-Eleven exist in our current charter, or was this
It's
a
it's a proposed,
It's a proposal.
it was proposed in the charter that we had passed, had put to the public hearing process.
Okay.
But we didn't receive any comments on that one, so that's still...
7-Eleven refers to it.
Right.
And anytime we have a general law, we wanted to make sure that, is it the right general law, and is this what we intended it to do? So that was my to-do from last meeting, is to bring this section to us.
So we would incorporate this language?
No, it just,
This is just for reference?
Right, the section says that the proceedings will follow Chapter 231A, or the provisions of Chapter 231 will follow in the event that the person who's been brought notice that they're violating the charter. If they continue to violate it, then you'd follow this procedure. And the court would have the ability to say, we agree you're violating it, or we disagree you're not violating it.
Got it.
And they can order compliance. The next handout is a calendar for the rest of 2018 into 2019. And on 2019, working back from the May 4th town meeting, there's still meetings before that, but the warrant closes the week of March 19th, 18th. So different than the way we did it last year. The goal would be, we want to have a public hearing soon enough before the warrant closing so that we could then make changes based on the public hearing, the last public hearing, and then still have a meeting to vote the revised thing so that it'll get into the warrant the way we want to. So
when does the warrant get published or printed?
So we have the additional ability of the warrant gets published, I think it's the week of April 8th
Probably
or
the
15th. It's like 3 weeks before.
Yeah, it's probably the...
Yeah. So we have that as an additional part. There were some comments made saying that we made changes after the warrant closed, but the warrant article was to see if the town will accept the item that was on file with the town clerk, and it was on file with the town clerk by the time the selectmen signed the warrant. So we technically met the requirements of having something on file when it was done, but I think it's better to have everything in place before that.
I think that public hearing should be completed by January 9th.
In a prior meeting, we talked about having multiple public hearings.
Right, I'm just saying it should be completed by January 9th. I think that
Not necessarily. What we talked about last time was that we would have an update to fall town meeting.
Yep.
And we would have a public hearing as soon afterward as possible.
Right.
Then we would have a second meeting in January and a final meeting either late February, beginning of March. I forget what we had said. So there would be 3 public hearings, 3 opportunities.
So the November 13th is the special town meeting. That was just voted last night.
November 13th, you said?
That's right, Tuesday, November 13th. So then we would...
So that's why we're not meeting on the 14th or the other one on the 14th.
Well, it's still scheduled as depending on what we do.
I think your highlighter was getting dry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another hearing December 12th? A month later? Or a real hearing, full hearing?
Right, so we don't want to have a meeting before town meeting. We want to just have a feedback thing available from town meeting and then go into the public hearing, then I would say, yeah, December 12th.
Yeah, so what we would do...
I mean, if you want to do it as soon after as you could, then we would be looking at November 28th. So.
You got Thanksgiving the week in between.
Is there anything magic about it being on a Wednesday?
No.
I know that's normally our meeting day, but we need to have an adequate room, and I would think we want to be televised.
Yep.
Is town hall still our only?
No, we can do it at the school.
We can do it at the
They can
school.
live broadcast from the school?
With some work, yes. But,
Okay. It's best from town hall in
Right.
terms of 3 camera, unless you're going to go to the town meeting setup, which they can do, which, you know,
in the auditorium.
right. But if you do it in the, what do you call it,
In the...
Blotter room.
no, the
school.
something.
Oh, the collaborative.
Yeah, then you got a 1 camera and bed mic, and not great mics.
Okay, yeah.
So the answer is yes, we don't have to have it on our night.
Right.
We can have mini hearings, but not official public hearings at different times if we want to have that, but
Right, and we said we might invite people in
Yeah.
Mhm.
from time to time
yeah.
for a specific discussion. So perhaps the first public hearing, let me put it that way, perhaps it's based on the availability of town hall.
Okay.
And
Shooting
if
maybe for the week after
for the week-
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the week after Thanksgiving.
November
Right.
26th, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. And then,
I would guess, when we look at all these yellow bullets, between whenever the first public hearing is and the warrant is done, I would guess that most of our work will be done
Oh, I think it's going to be done before we get to...
public hearing. I mean, what I'm saying is then if we get a lot of feedback and we want to come and vote on a revision or something, but I don't know that we need to meet
no,
twice a month unless we have input from a public hearing, right?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, my goal would be September and October is when we should try to schedule whatever departments we want to have come in, that we know we want to come in, and we'll talk about who that, tonight, we'll start figuring out who that we want in there, who've asked, and who we want to talk to.
Nancy, did you have the housing authority before? You didn't have the...
No.
housing authority. I can't remember who had the housing authority before.
Whoever talked to them, I think their response was they didn't have any comment.
Which is really too bad, because what it says in the charter they do isn't what they do.
What's the charter say? I haven't read that recently.
Actually, I have to go into my sample, but I sent an email out, reaching out to them, and I included the language in the charter. It's very short, but it also basically sees them as not just overseeing, White Street, but that seems to be what they do. But basically that they seek out other ways to address the housing issues in Lunenburg. And
Yeah, no, they do not do that, and whether they have the capacity to do that.
but I think, again, given what it says in the charter, that would be a group I would expect the Board of Selectmen to want to hear from time to time, if that's indeed what they do. But I was trying to remember who had them and how successful they were at hearing back, because I haven't heard anything back from them.
So there's also a we haven't filled the vacancy, a housing partnership committee, I think that hasn't been revitalized for years. And I'm not sure if it's even listed on our vacancy list.
I think it is. It's certainly on the talent bank form,
Okay.
but it's not clear what it does. And maybe that is supposed to do what the charter says that the Lunenburg housing.
Okay. So coming back to the So the public hearing the week of November 26th. We want to have one last vote by us on the 13th of March. Just putting that one in there if there's a need, if needed. So we would have a public hearing on November. We would hear all that information. We would then work in December to respond to that. So we ought to come back. I'm sorry, did we talk about already sometime in January, February for another hearing?
I think we should do it in January because February is when the town manager is going to be presenting the budget.
Okay, all right. So the week of, let's see, is the what's Martin Luther King Day is around the 14th. So the week of the 21st for the next public hearing?
Okay.
January.
I mean, if we even need it.
Right. Well, as we get closer to it, we'll see. All right. I think those are the major dates we need to. I'll work with the town manager's office to find out what's available based on typical meetings. We also want to get before the Board of Selectmen, because we didn't make a presentation to the board last year. And while they can come to our hearing, it's probably good, and that gives us another public opportunity to be televised and talk about it. So that one probably could be the first or second week of February. We could do it earlier, but...
And at what point do we want to have information available for publication? In advance of the public hearings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the goal would be before each public hearing, the proposed draft would be there.
So then are we looking for potential, and when I say publication, I mean like some informational stuff in the ledger or something. But I didn't know if you wanted to do anything at the end of October or something important against the special town meeting we're going to be talking about.
So, you're looking for the open space?
Yeah.
They're upstairs.
Oh.
So our meeting on the 24th, so the meeting on October 10th, we would finalize,
We'll take a vote on what we want to recommend.
yeah, and get that material distributed.
Okay.
So that's the votes and materials for the special town meeting report. Okay. With whom do we think we need to meet?
When does the warrant goes for the special town meeting? You want me to check that?
Yeah.
Hold on.
So we could just submit a request. I mean, do we want to submit a request to see if the town will vote to hear a report from the Charter Review Committee?
Yeah, that's fine. It would just be to hear a report.
Yeah. In terms of what goes on the warrant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're not voting on anything other than to hear a report.
Yeah. They could choose not to hear the report.
That's right.
They wouldn't have to respond.
There you go.
Or it closes on October 9th.
I'll get an email out to her tomorrow. So, right now, people that we want to meet with, we want Carl Luck in here to talk about the voting requirements, ranked choice. Soon we want the town manager back again after we've come up with some proposed changes, whatever the language we've done, to make sure it's consistent with that. Depending on
I think with the proposed change to the writing candidacy, that was Phyllis that initially brought it
It was
forward.
Phyllis, and then we came up with language, and then Carl came up with different language as a result of that.
Okay.
So we'll do Phyllis.
I would probably just invite them both.
Yep, good, thank you. Depending on what we come up with, since we're taking out the clarifying language, which was not clarifying language from the park, cemetery, and sewer, when we send them the simplified, if not completely revised, they may or may not want to come in. So I would say we'd want to have those three committees give the option to come and talk to us. Karen Bernard reached out to me and asked where we were with this, and I explained that we were taking out some of the language. They have a new member and they want to bring that member up to speed. So as soon as we get this language, we'll get that to them.
Were we still making changes or just taking out what we put in?
Just taking out.
What we put in?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was,
There were no other changes.
no. Library may or may not, that was a miscommunication on my part. We probably should be okay with the language that'll be in there. And in fact, part of it went to how they hired. They still make the decision on the hiring, but they have to follow the town's procedure. They've actually had a lot of hiring that has gone through the town's procedure. So now we can find out, as a result of that, can we have the language that's going to make everybody happy on that? But the library might be. Any other departments that come to mind?
No, but I would like to, I still want to, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, and you guys can help me on this, but it may just be that this is fine. But it says that the Housing Authority shall make studies of the housing needs of the community and shall provide programs to make available housing to families of low income and for elderly persons of low income. So I don't know if they make studies.
No.
That's in the charter?
That's in the charter.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's why I wanted, like when I reached out and I pulled out what was in the charter, I was like, do they do that? Because I don't think they do that. And when I went through all of their history of minutes, it really had more to do with, overseeing maintenance at White Street.
Yeah. I know they were involved in when they expanded the housing for the elderly to housing for the family units right next door. They had to do documentation of housing need at that point, but
they may be doing it. It may just be that because they don't make any reports to the town.
I don't believe they're doing it.
I don't know. So anyway, so that's why I was hoping to hear back from them.
Okay. We'll do a little outreach on that, because either we should be asking them to do what's in the charter, or should we be taking it out and reassigning it to somebody else? So, based on other review, I'm going through the different committees.
And then the rest of it just said whatever else they're appointed to. They have other duties per Mass General Law.
School committee didn't have any, because we're not really doing much on that. I think that's it for now, for who we'll talk to. Are there dates, if anybody happens to know their schedule in advance of where people are not available between now and the end of December? We probably won't meet that day after Christmas, but stranger things have happened.
But hopefully there won't be any tools.
Right. At one of our public hearing, everybody comes out and says, we like all your changes. We can hope.
And then at the second public hearing, then everybody will come out and say, we hate all these changes. But
Well, and the other thing is, just to restate, and I'll state it on a regular basis, we are not going on an all or nothing vote. We will be separating out, at least one article will be what are considered non-controversial, typographical, clarifying, truly clarifying language is one thing. Substantive changes that are probably not controversial, and we will be able to gauge that based on the public impact, and we can bundle those all together. And then any changes that are substantial, substantive, and are controversial, those will be separated out issue by issue so that you won't be forced to vote one way or the other to try to get what you want in. So there may be several articles that we will be presenting, but that does give everybody the opportunity to say yes or no and get some in and maybe others not.
We got a little bit of pushback on that at the last, not the last finance committee, my last.
Your last finance committee.
My last finance committee, Dave Rogers, thought that was a bad idea. I'm not sure that he elaborated.
I'm not sure either. I think he just said that he just thought it should be all or nothing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, well, town meeting gets to do what town meeting wants to do.
Right.
So we can't force town meeting to accept every change or not with the way we're doing this.
Right.
So that procedurally, we don't have that ability to do that.
So would the voting procedure then be to, okay, so the first vote would be to accept the changes to the charter that are basically the corrections.
Yes.
Right.
The second vote would be to amend the charter as to the number of town meetings.
Yeah.
The third vote would be to amend the charter in the, whatever.
Elected town clerk could be another one.
So that basically, so those amendments can be voted up and down.
One at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can see how that would go, but
Yeah, I mean, and the
what
fact
do we
is,
do if they don't vote yes on the first one?
they don't change. So
So then we
we've been living, what you can go on to the other changes. So we need to make all the different changes not dependent on the other changes.
Right.
So the part the charter currently says you have to post 24 hours in advance of the meeting.
Yes.
State law says 48.
Right.
The fact that it's wrong, you go by the state law. So
Right.
we would just go on with what we're doing now. We're just trying to improve.
Well, no, I guess it would just be in the wording of the vote, because basically if we have to know what charter we're amending when we have the second vote.
No, you're always amending what is existing
Okay.
because it's not final until the legislature
That's right,
actually
the
votes
Attorney
the
General has
change.
to sign off or somebody
So,
signs off.
yeah. You had a comment?
I wanted to talk a little bit on the ones that are controversial. We kind of said we were going to do we were going to lay them out with the two choices, and then we were going to do a position paper on each side.
Yep.
Do you see that being done by this committee as a whole, or by the proponents of one side versus the other? I'm just trying to think
So
about
if we
the
have proponents on both sides on this committee, I would propose that we would be assigned within this committee.
Okay.
You know, if this committee is 100% for one side, then we want to find somebody else out there who has been vocal, who's willing to be doing the right.
So does this group, I'm thinking about the construct of the warrant article. Do we, as a group, vote on, we now have a pro statement and a con statement?
That's not in the article. So for instance, just go back to the elected...
So the article just says to change it to do X or Y.
Right.
And the other stuff is...
It's a handout, and ideally we would get that before the public hearing process,
Fine.
so that people get it
Yeah.
up front, and it's not a surprise. By the time we get to town meeting, there really shouldn't be any surprises on any
Right.
of the issues.
Right.
So that was what the issue was when we had last time, is that when we did the hearing, it wasn't a surprise because we had been doing, but it was the first time people got to make the arguments. So the arguments shouldn't be a surprise by the time town meeting, and in fact, it might make town meeting go a little faster because the moderator could say, I'm going to let some conversation go, but you have the pro and con things. Do you have anything different to say that's not already on here? That might make the discussion going forward. Ideally, most people are going to be walking into town meeting on most of the issues. They're going to know which side they're going to be on. Some of the non-controversial substantive changes, that might be a little bit different. Okay. So that was my agenda for tonight. We don't have minutes. I didn't do public comment, so I will do that after we're almost done. I'll just make sure I haven't missed anything. So move minutes. Meeting and outreach schedule. We're still going to do more work on the outreach, but we need to get the major items now. Some discussions of proposed changes not getting moved. Next meeting, September 12th. Any public comment from the public? Any comment from the board?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
7:37.
Great meeting.
Well,